What happens when people from every corner of America, hunters, hikers, researchers, outdoorsmen, and even military veteran, all describe encounters that are eerily similar? For decades, thousands of eyewitnesses have come forward with stories they say changed their lives forever. In this special compilation, you'll hear first-hand reports from people who insist they encountered an unknown creature, stories filled with moments of shock, fear, and lasting questions. Whether you believe Bigfoot is an undiscovered species, a misidentification, or something else entirely, these are the voices of people who say they experienced something real. This is the Cryptid Crew Podcast. Turn up the volume, keep an open mind, and decide for yourself.
But once we got to camp, we were on the other ridge line, and it overlooked this whole valley and everything. And it was actually really, really cool spot. It's those pine trees that are kind of like spread out, so there's not a lot of foliage anywhere. It's all like basically like just a pine tree here and there. We ended up just having a regular night. We started having a fire, and we were going to turn in kind of early, so it was only like 9 or 10 at most. And then we started hearing some stomping coming closer to us up the mountainside, and we assumed it was going to be a bear because it's very common out there for especially black bear. And so we did what we were told to do, which is like you stand in a cluster and you grab your pots and pans, and you like everybody makes themselves really large. And so there was like 7 of us, so we're all standing around together, and this thing starts coming closer and closer. And so we all have flashlights, but they only go so far. And whatever this was like just out of the range. And every now and then we get a glimpse of like a shadow moving back and forth. And we were listening, and one of the guys was like, he's like, I don't hear, it's only two steps. It's kind of like just big stepping back and forth out in the shadows. And we can start to hear, it was well aware we were there. And now we're like, get out of here, bear, get out of here. It made a couple gruff type noises towards us. And we were kind of like getting puzzled because it didn't sound like what we would think. Like we've seen bears before, but it didn't sound like what we would know a bear to sound like. But then the otter thing happened, which was a small rock that was like palm size, just kind of bounced and rolled right in front of us. We're all like, bears throw rocks? Bears throw, like we were just kind of panicking. And then it's moving around in the, back and forth still. And so I go back and go to the campfire, and one of the other guys had the same idea. And we pulled a couple of the logs out of the fire, and we're just like waving them in the air, like, trying to like get it, like scare it away. And then that's when a rock that was more like probably about that size just thudded right in front of us. And we were like, that's not a bear. What is that? Now we're just kind of standing there and panicking with the flashlights, trying to see anything. And then we hear this thing like start crashing through some trees, and it's like shaking some trees around. And then one of the trees you just hear it crackling, and it's like popping and making all these noises. And then so we're still kind of standing in a line and, on the edge of our campsite area. And then out of the darkness, just this log that was probably about that wide diameter and maybe like 6-7 feet wide, just comes flying over our heads, lands into our campground, and then just rolls through the like campfire. And we all ducked, but it was probably like 2-3 feet above our heads. Like it was way over our heads. And we now were like, what is this? At the time, none of us were like thinking like this could be a Bigfoot thing or anything. We were just stunned. Then the thing like gave like roar, but it was kind of like as if like felt, honestly, man, it felt like it was annoyed we were there. Like it felt like move, like get out of the way, go away kind of thing. But when it roared, that you could feel it in your chest, and it was like, the description I would say is it's really weird. It's a deep bellow, like gut roar, like an animal would do, but then there's like a combination of almost like a grown man that has a high, like a pitchy sound to it, combined into one. It's a bizarre sound. It rattled us, and we all kind of backed up into our campsite more, try to get closer to the fire. And then we just heard it just start stomping down the ridge line. It's a decent steep ridge. We had to like switchbacks all the way up, and it just went straight down it. And when it was going down, we could hear it stomping for a little bit. And then about we're now like, is it gone? Is it gone? And we're all talking to each other and trying to reassure each other. And we started throwing all the logs on the fire, just like build that thing up high as it could go. And I remember we were still like standing guard kind of for about, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes. And then we kind of backed off and went towards the fire and just were hanging around the fire thinking like, okay, I think it's gone. But then from across the valley, probably about 30, 35 minutes, we just hear that same roar, and you could hear it go across the entire valley. And that give you an idea how much land that covered. It took us like probably like 4 hours to do the whole back. We had to do all these switchbacks, and then there's a few miles in between on that valley floor and then going on to the other side. That took us like so much of our hike. And in 30, 40 minutes, that thing was clear across that valley. But later on that trip, about 2 days later, we were down in one of these valleys, and it happened to have, I guess they had like a shower go through there, and there was mud and stuff in there. And sure enough, we saw this footprint in there.
Chino, how long did the encounter last? If you had
Man,
to
it could,
guess.
if honestly, like everybody like thinks it lasts forever, it was probably like a couple minutes at most. It did feel like it went back and forth a few times. The uprooting of the tree, the throwing the rocks. Yeah. So it was probably like 2, 3 minutes at most.
Did any of you guys think Bigfoot at the time or that night? What was your first thought?
So after the fact, when we were all kind of standing around the fire, a couple of guys were saying it. And then we quickly stopped talking about it. I think it was just that fight or flight where nobody wanted to relive whatever we just went through, especially while it was still nighttime. The next day we were hiking the opposite direction. So once we got enough distance, it was kind of like, that was a crazy experience. And then we would talk about it, but it was kind of one of those things where you're just like processing it, I think. And I remember talking about it for a little bit with a couple of the guys, but then some of the guys didn't want to talk about it at all. It was the first experience I ever had that made me, I've always been skeptical, but then I was like, maybe plausible now, like rather than skeptic. It's more like, oh, okay, we just don't understand everything,
No, we sat there in the dark, and we would do some wood knocks. Mike would do a howl, and we would just kind of sit and see what would happen for, an hour or two. And the setup I had then, now I have a 22-inch parabolic microphone that hooks into a recorder. Back then, I had a Sony Handycam that had night vision on it, but I basically used it as the recording device because I didn't expect to pick anything up visually. But I had this thing set to where it would pick up whatever, because it's great. It's got a great how it picks up the environment. And basically, we had the ones when we first went into the area that night. There was one howl we recorded, and then nothing else happened. And then we proceeded to go to the graveyard, and we were there probably 45 minutes. Nothing was happening. Almost left. Then we heard whistles, and then we could hear something approaching, at different sides. And then they just went off, and the coyotes went off with them. So there's two separate things going off here, but you can tell there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff in the background, but you can tell the coyotes from this thing, because the coyotes are a higher pitch and they always go back to the yippee kind of dog sound. And this thing is just howling, and the duration is just way longer. And unfortunately, we had never experienced anything like that. So we're gabbing at the same time. kind of ruining things, and but all hell broke loose at that graveyard.
How far away do you think the vocalizations were?
Wow, that's tough because of things echo and stuff, but they at that location they're within 100 yards, but probably a lot closer than that,
Oh, wow.
just based on the terrain.
Okay. So fairly close then. And you guys believe that there were more than one. Is that right?
Well, yeah, that became apparent um, as we went on. We kind of weren't even thinking about that early on. It was just, wow, did you hear that? Wow, I hope the recorder's picking that up, and kind of like that. And then everything stopped at the graveyard, just like somebody threw a switch. And we waited probably maybe another 45 minutes, nothing. We pack up and go. And then here comes the cat. We stop at a place we call the bridge. There's a little metal bridge there. At this, David Ellis, it took a few years for us to meet him through Julie Wrench of Monster X Radio. He's analyzed these recordings. Now he said he can't say they're Bigfoot because Bigfoot's not certified. But what he can say is we recorded no known animal in North America, and that some of the screams, howls, whatever you want to call them, pegged higher than a baboon on a spectrograph, and that's evidence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And at the bridge is where we recorded that first one that hit that high, and it was way closer. This thing, when it went off, I mean, it was furious. You can kind of feel that. And then the coyotes are going off with it. David took that recording, he subdued the coyotes, and he looped that, and that thing, I mean, it's like a train siren going off. That thing and it's within 50 yards or less, probably 30.
Yeah, you sent me the recording maybe a month or so ago, and I took a listen, and it's going off. There's no doubt. You can hear the coyotes yip, but you can hear this, and it's just a constant, and it just goes up, like you said. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a shark remora relationship with these two creatures. They scavenge off each other or something, but there's something going on because a lot of times you've got both of them at the scene of the crime to say,
Was that your first encounter of any kind?
No, at East Fork, the first night hike I had went on, we had the rocks thrown, and that really rattled me because I wasn't expecting that. And but that night in Adams County, that was the first night I've ever heard vocalizations with my own ears live on at the scene. I had listened to the Ohio Howl and other things that I would find on the internet, but that time, I heard them with my own ears, which is different. I mean, that is just, you don't forget that.
And we were fishing and throwing out lines, and we kept moving. We didn't want to stay in one spot because the fish tend to move, and they figure out what you're doing after a while. So we kept moving up the river, and I thought, well, it was another fisherman at first because it was all squatted down low by the river, and it was holding the stick, and I didn't realize it, but it was trying to spear the fish, standing there with the stick. And we were watching it for a good 5 minutes, me and my buddy, and it didn't notice us, and it just kept, and finally it got one. But when it stood up, I realized just how big the thing was. It was incredible. It must have been at least 8 or 9 feet tall. It was jet black hair. The hands were absolutely massive. I mean, the fingers must have been 7, 8, 9 inches long. I mean, they were just incredibly huge hands. And it looked at us, and it took a few steps towards us, and it kind of made this grumbling roar, not like a scream like the other time. And I guess it wanted our fish too. Me and my buddy looked at, and we just threw the line with the fish over there. And sure enough, it ran over and grabbed it. It looked at us one more time, and then it peeled off into the woods.
Wow.
And their skin colors, it's hard to explain. Their skin color is it's like a light gray, and their hair is really long. Oh, man. 6, 7 inches, really long. The one we saw was jet black. I mean, black.
Did you get much detail of the face?
Well, their teeth look like ours. The nose is really broad. I mean, incredibly broad. Their eyes, they're really deep set. Like they're way behind, you see me and you, our eyes are here, but theirs are like really deep in the skull. They have a very conical shaped head, and the forehead comes to a thick brow, really thick bone ridge right above their eyes. Yeah, we got a good look at it. I mean, it was, like I said, we were pretty close.
Right. That length of an encounter, that's something that doesn't happen often. So that's why, I'd asked you that. And that's pretty insane that y'all were able to be able to get that close to one and see that and get that,
Well,
get that kind
honestly,
of detail.
we were downwind, first of all. That was our big blessing, was that. They didn't notice us until, man, probably 10 minutes into it before it even realized that we were there. That we weren't making any noise and we were just simply watching. That's all. And
What was your first thought when you saw it, or y'all both realized what you had seen?
what are we really seeing? You know what I mean? Because I grew up playing in the woods all my life. So to see something of that magnitude for the first time, it's really mind blowing because your mind doesn't, it's trying to comprehend what it's seeing. You're almost in shock, really. And then once you come to the realization, oh my God, what we just saw, you know, luckily it was over with, luckily it just wanted to fish and ran off.
Do you think the grunt or the growl it made was trying to intimidate you guys to get out of there, maybe?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was threatening. It was almost like a greeting. Hey, I'm here. Don't get closer. It was just letting us know, hey, I see you. Don't, it didn't seem like it was going to come over and beat us to death or anything. But it wanted to fish, though. It did. It wanted to fish. Because when it grunted, it looked at the fish and it was pointing at our fish. Oh, it wanted our fish, and we gave it to it. By God, we weren't gonna tell the thing no.
The next day we go back. It rained that night. It rains a bunch here in Southern Illinois in May. Yeah, it happened to that night. But it took me a little while, but I was able to find where it happened at, like where the creature was. And I was able to get pictures of the tracks and the dig area. The tracks were kind of filled in a little bit just from the runoff. Like I said, it was right there at the bottom of the hill where it was digging in. But like the hole and everything, I could fit my hand in it. I've got a pretty big hand, and it was collapsed in, and my hand still fit. So I wonder how big that hole really was to begin with. The only thing I can think is that maybe it saw a groundhog and took off after it, and it tried to like burrow away or something. But I don't know, because I didn't see, with the exception of the footprints from the creature, I did not see like raccoon, gopher prints, anything like that. So I really have no idea what it was after in the in the hillside. Whenever I'm taking these pictures, here's another thing to tell you how big this was. My wife said me standing out there where it was, and I was taking pictures like above, she could barely see me. And then when I knelt down to take close-up pictures, she lost sight of me completely. When I saw this creature, it was knelt down, and I was seeing probably what I would say was mid-thigh up. And then when it stood up, saw the rest of it. So I'm guessing every bit of 8 foot. I mean,
Had to be.
yeah.
Sounds like a big creature. That's awesome that you went back and did a comparison
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get some type of detail.
And the weird thing about the build of this creature, it was so weird, because when I think Bigfoot, I'm thinking like Patty from the Patterson-Gimlin film. And this was leaner. It had the build of, I don't know if you've ever seen the Sam Elliott movie, The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot. The creature in that one, it had this like leaner, more of like a V-shaped, torso, kind of like a swimmer's build, still muscular, just not the big hulking figure like Patty is. And you could tell it was strong. And whenever I walked towards the creek, following the footprints and everything that was in the mud, there was this big opening where you could tell something had been going in and out of there for a while. And I was hoping I could find like a big, deep impression in the creek bank, but I didn't find one. But I did find about 10 feet up in a tree break
where the branch, it was about, looked like it was about 3 inches around, and it was broke down. Then it was twisted around 2 or 3 times. And to me, that says intention, strength, and something with a hand.
Something with a thumb.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was crazy seeing that.
And one night we were sitting there. Usually we had kids with us, but we didn't that night. And we were out there, and I said, will you go outside with me? I have to use the restroom, and I don't want to walk all the way across that field to the porta potty. I had a bad feeling. And so he said, yeah, sure, I'll go out there. And he stood there. I walked to the right of the tent, and he stood facing the open clearing with the flashlight. And we both caught eye reflection. And he said, what is that? And I said, that is really tall. That can't be an elk. And he said, well, what would be that tall? And I said, I don't know. But it was staring right at me. You could see its eye line was at me. And he said, it's watching you. It's watching you go to the bathroom. And I said, well, I started to panic a little bit. And I said, do you know the Lord's Prayer? And he said, yeah. I said, start reciting it. And these two huge eyes, blue, white, they were so white they were blue, went from looking at me and did this to staring right at him. Like you could see you couldn't see its body. It was so black below the eyes. Everything around it was so black. You couldn't see any body, but you could tell by the way that it moved, it had to reposition itself to stare at him head on, if that makes sense. It was very unnatural movements. And he panicked and said, what is that? And I said, I can't tell you. It's not an elk. Elk aren't 12 feet tall. Because it was standing next to a telephone pole, and we went out there the next day and checked how tall it was compared to the telephone pole. And it had to have been between 10 and 12 feet tall.
Wow.
And it was on the other side of the fence line where the telephone pole was, that was leaf litter everywhere. I went back the next morning to see if I could see footprints, and I didn't see any footprints. But the moment that he started saying that prayer, he said that it looked into his soul. He said he could feel it. He said it was so uncanny that he didn't want to go back outside after dark ever again. It was almost, well, I think like last month around Thanksgiving was a year that happened. And
okay,
we moved off of the mountain at the end of December. We just were not comfortable up there anymore. None of the animals were bothered. None of the dogs or the chickens or the geese or the goats the sheep were bothered, but we were seriously unhinged by that. We tried to get up there before dark and left after, I had to leave at 6 a.m. in the morning every day and go through 2 locked gates to get off the property at dark. So I was having some issues with my own comfort levels, but in that type of area, you carry I carried a 9mm everywhere I went on that property because I wasn't going to be anywhere without something, especially going through gates after dark and before dark, before light in the morning. It was unhinged. It was a very interesting situation. It was very, very interesting.
Prior to you seeing the eyes, did you feel any type of unease or?
Usually I'm the big tough girl that's like, leave me be, I can go do what I want. But I was like, will you please go out there with me? I'm not feeling comfortable. There wasn't any birds going off. It was eerily quiet, which usually you can hear all of the little night birds and the crickets and the, other animals getting ready for bed, and there was nothing. It was silent. I was very uncomfortable that night. Yeah.
Could you see any type of detail or outline of the creature itself?
No, that's the crazy part of it. All I could see was the eyes. It was like the light was being just evaporated. Once it hit the eyes, there was nothing. There was black. It was like there wasn't even a flashlight over. Like it was absorbing the light, if that makes sense. We couldn't see any definition whatsoever. And that's what we were looking for to determine what kind of critter it was, where's the outline?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then let me ask you this. Did it feel more evil to you then than maybe an actual animal or something?
I didn't feel like it was more evil. I think
Okay.
of it as being a entity of some kind, whether it's a flesh and blood critter that lives in our realm or a critter that goes like portals. I don't know. I've never seen anything like that. I know that it understood what he was saying because of the way it acted. It was just very odd. Like it understood what the ramifications of what he was saying. Because it just stared right at him, and he was like, he said he felt like he was almost struck by it when it looked at him. He said it looked straight into my eyes. How could it see my eyes? And we couldn't explain it. It was the weirdest thing that I've ever experienced, and I've never been more afraid than that night.
Huh?
There's so many sightings in Florida as well.
Mm-hmm.
Tons.
Dude, you want to hear this? My
Yes.
sister saw it in Florida.
Are
My
you
sister.
serious?
Okay, now listen. Okay, I'm going to give you the whole encounter. You ready?
Okay. Yes.
My sister is she was at the time, an ER nurse. Okay. My sister is the antithesis of me. She is short. She is tiny. She is completely scientific. Everything is like analytical, deductive reasoning. And she always would explain everything away. During COVID, she was a runner. And during COVID, she was in Florida. I don't know the exact area. I mean, I think she lived near Tampa. She went out, and this was very stupid, and she says it was stupid. She went to a very wooded area to jog by herself. Like, she just needed to get out. It was after shift. Things were crazy. She went jogging and she was deep in the stuff, right? Deep in like this like kind of Everglade area, like further than she should have gone. And she said that she saw a huge, hairy, man-like thing stand up. And get this one. She calls me freaking out. And trust me, she hates the fact that this happened because she doesn't want to think about it. And she didn't know anything about it. She didn't know the name. She goes, all she could talk about was this big hairy thing that she saw and how bad it smelled. How bad it smelled. Think about that. And she's like, it was so bad. I couldn't get it out of my nostrils. And I was like, I was like, she's playing a joke on me. Like, I was like, there's no way. And she swears up and down. She was like crying when she called me. She's like, I saw and she wouldn't even call it Bigfoot. I don't know what like a big hairy man, big hairy thing, because she doesn't want to give it a name, right? I'm like, well, it's actually a skunk ape. Because you're in Florida and everything. And she's like, I was so afraid and I got out of there really fast. And she said, I don't think it was going to hurt me, but it stood up. And I'm like, I don't know. She said it was real tall. She couldn't tell me how tall it was, but yeah. And the believability for me is ER nurse who doesn't care about this stuff at all. Right. She will tell you it years later. She's like, I saw something. I don't know what it was, but I saw something.
How long did the encounter last?
Super short. Oh my gosh. Not even 30 seconds. She got out. And it was a distance. She said it was still that's what she was surprised at. She was pretty far away from this thing and it stunk. Right. So I don't know how far. I mean, like probably 50 yards. Yeah. But it was like she was overwhelmed at the smell. Like all she could talk about was how bad it smelled.
That's insane. And that was not a thought for her, was it, whatsoever?
Not at all. Not in the slightest bit. It was right now. She didn't have a dog at the time, or she had like a little tiny dog, I think. She went and got a dog to run with. Like after that, I don't think she's ever run by herself ever again after that. Ever. I know.
Let me ask you this.
She didn't think it was going to eat her, though. She did say that. She was afraid, but she said, I didn't think it was going to eat me. I just needed to get out of there. I was like, because I said, did you think it was going to chase you? She's like, no, I just knew. It was like, I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. You know what I mean? Like, it was all this. She's like, I knew that I needed to get out of that area as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
nuts,
crazy.
Man. I know.
That is crazy. Yeah. Give us some detail about what led up to it and then the encounter itself.
That night, I was kind of windy a little bit, not enough to create the sounds that me and my grandmother was actually hearing. We kept hearing strange, almost like a dog growl, but not exactly. That's the best way I can explain it. I go outside. I thought it might have been my buddy playing the trick on us, but I still took my gun with me just in case. Went outside, didn't see anything, and having a flashlight, I checked on the vehicles and all of that. I'd come back around the house, come up on the porch, and I could smell something, but it wasn't a scent I was familiar with. So I turned to go back in the house, and to my right, all of a sudden, I catch a huge shadow in the darkness. But this thing, it created a shadow within the shadows, if that makes sense. It was like a living shadow. If I had to guess, this thing might have been around 12 feet tall. And that's taken into consideration him standing on a hill. So it's standing there, it moves, and it spooks. It spooks me. I fully admit that whenever it moves, I just brought my gun up and I just popped off 6 shots. I know for a fact 2 of them hit. It just kind of stood there, looked down, and then ran up the hill. It just took 2 hollow point 9mm rounds like it was nothing. Really? And that might have been 30 yards or so. So it was very close proximity.
Did you notice any fur or hair or any details to the face?
No, I could not make out any of the details on that one other than it was just a bulky shadow. Like I caught a brief glimpse of the fur hair as it started running up the hair, $half size of light hit it. It was dark colored, but as far as details, I can't really make it out.
Did it make any type of noise
No,
at all?
nothing. No sound, no nothing. And that's an instance of I feel bad because I just panicked and pulled the trigger.
Do you think it was a Bigfoot or do you think it was something else?
Absolutely, I do think it was a Bigfoot. A regular person is not going to be walking through this terrain. You're talking terrain that's probably 80 degrees in angle, almost vertical. Thick vegetation, dense woods, a lot of hardwoods too. It's not an easy place to traverse, especially in the mountains. So for something to actually be in there and call it home can be absolutely brutal in this area. And it's nothing to play around with.
Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I had always wrote it off as, an urban legend or a campfire tale that scare the kids or just Indian lore, what have you. But as far as believing it myself, being an avid hunter and hiker, fisherman, I've even scaled a few mountains. I had no reason to believe that that legend was true. So I guess you'd call me a skeptic at that time, and then all that changed for me on April 3rd, 1993, and that's when I was a sergeant in the Oregon Army National Guard, more specifically a combat engineer, and as such, we utilize a lot of explosives in our training and in real-time combat situations to take out bridges, for instance, to take out minefields, different things that we can employ explosives to either get our troops through a certain area or prevent the enemy from coming in to where we don't want them to. So on that particular day, we were in the Oregon Coast Range between the seaside town, the town's called Seaside, between Seaside and Saddle Mountain State Park. We had special permission to use some private timberland to conduct our training. And that training consisted of using 3 different rock quarries, gravel quarries, that were in that private timberland. And at each quarry was a different combat scenario, if you will. And we were to go around to each of them and practice our trade. So these weren't small explosions by any means. These were very large explosions using upwards of 100+ pounds, sometimes 200 pounds of ammonium nitrate or plastic explosives, C4, just depending on the scenario. We had blasted at the first 2 out of 3 and had just set our charges, cratering charge, at the 3rd site. And of course, standard protocols, Once you light that fuse, you get the heck out of there, right? Then we'd go to a safe area, wait for the explosion, and then come back and check our work. Pretty standard stuff for combat engineers. And so we had lit the fuses on that cratering charge and boarded our vehicles and started heading to a safe area. As I said, I was a passenger in a Humvee, the second of 5 vehicles in this convoy. And I sat directly behind the driver. And it was an unusually nice day. It was untypically nice. So I had the window down. And having hunted that particular unit there, the Saddle Mountain unit, it was just natural for me to look about the countryside looking for wildlife, specifically deer or elk or whatever. And as we rounded this very slow sweeping right turn, the second blast site came into sight. It came into my view. And as I looked down toward this rock quarry that we had detonated a large explosion maybe an hour earlier, I noticed 3 figures, very dark figures, standing right out in the rock quarry itself. And by figures, I mean they were standing on 2 legs and obviously observing us. But these 3 individuals, it only took me a couple of seconds to realize these weren't people. I mean, initially that was my concern, that some civilians had possibly gotten through our security cordon and gotten into the area, which would not have been good. So, but like I say, after about 2 seconds of really straining to see what I was looking at, I realized that these were not human at all. And by that, I mean, let's just the profile itself. These things were black from head to foot. There was no sign of any clothing whatsoever on them. And if you can imagine, behind them is the type of rock. There was basalt, which is kind of a light concrete gray color. These black figures standing in front of that light gray backdrop made a very unique contrast. And what I observed, what really jumped out at me initially was these arms. These arms reached down to their knees, and they didn't appear to be bending forward, just standing straight upright. But again, these arms were just unusually long. The legs also were disproportionately long compared to say, a human torso. They all were built like bodybuilders, to be honest with you, Mark. They were broad shoulders, very broad shoulders, a barrel chest, which tapered down to their waist. Again, these long arms, just I can't get that out of my head. The other thing is, while the largest of the 3, and I would estimate somewhere between 8 and 9 feet in height, while that one stood there almost statue still, if you will, the 2 that flanked it on its left and right were swaying side to side, like shifting their weight from one foot to the other. And in the process, these long pendulous arms were swinging all the way down at their knees again. And they did that the entire time I was watching them. And this wasn't a 5-10 second view. I estimated I watched them for nearly 20 to 25 seconds. It's a pretty good long view. It doesn't sound like very much time, but look at your watch for 25 seconds and imagine seeing what I was looking at. I mean, it seemed like an eternity, but I was just in shock. I couldn't take my eyes off them. And I think subconsciously I thought, if I take my eyes off them and look back, they're going to be gone. So I was just focused on what I was looking at. And eventually we rounded that corner and I lost sight of them, and I just kind of fell back into my seat. And, my head was just reeling with a million questions, as you can imagine. And it wasn't long before we got to that safety staging area. And I just instinctively jumped out of my Humvee when we came to a stop. And since we had a few more vehicles still rolling in, I ran back in the direction we just came from. My hope was to be able to get another view of him. I mean, standing rule was, though, that because of the danger of what we're doing, that everybody had to be within eyesight of the group. And I went as far as I dared, 100 meters or more. And I knew if I went another 50 meters, I'd probably had seen them. But I was limited as far as I could go. But I stood there on my tiptoes with my hand up to my forehead, and I'm looking off in the distance, trying to see over this darn this berm that was blocking my view, just straining to get another view of them. And suddenly I heard somebody off to my right shout my name. And I looked over, and Sergeant Martin said, "What are you looking at?" And I dropped my hand to my side and I said, "Oh, nothing." And he continued to come my way. And I remember he was smoking on a cigarette at the time. And he gets right up to me and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at the second blast site." And, you can imagine I'm like, "Oh, please say what I hope you're going to say." But I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" And he took a slow drag off his cigarette and he looked left and he looked right, made sure nobody else was within earshot. And he leaned in and said, "I saw 3 large, dark haircut. I'm Bigfoot, I think." And at that, of course, I went, "Yeah, Jim, I saw him too."
Yeah, during hunting seasons out here, you hear lots of reports. And growing up around here and being an avid hunter, I would hear reports of people's deer missing and stuff like that. And I just chalked it up to bad shot placement and really bad tracking job, right? You find blood, you can find a deer. Well, it actually happened to me this October where I know we were talking before the show about my county in Michigan, Allegan County, and the BFRO, and they have a spot on there. And you're like, oh, it's in the state game area. And that's exactly where I hunt. And this is exactly where it happened. So mid-October, I was out doing some bow hunting like I normally do. And I had this little spike come out, and being on state land, I mean, I'm going to take it for the freezer, especially early season. So I made a perfect shot. I got it all on video, and I thought this deer was going down. So I waited about an hour. It started getting dark. And I climb out of the tree and I find blood right away. It's a good shot. And I track it about 30 yards in the thick brush. And I'm finding giant piles of blood, I'm like, all right, I've got a deer on the ground. And walked up, and there was a massive pile of blood. Like it had been bled out, but there was no deer. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of snow because it was mid-October, but we did have a lot of rain, and it was just super muddy out there. So, I mean, I could follow my tracks, no problem. But this deer just vanished. And my first thought was, oh, coyotes. Coyotes must have got him. So I'm looking around, and coyotes, they're going to leave something behind. And at this point, it's probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from the time I shot him. And you would have heard it. But no, I went down. I looked all night till about 11 o'clock at night. Went home, got a little bit of sleep, called my boss and said, hey, I've got a deer on the ground. I'm going to be late to work. And I went out there and I looked until noon, and I'd never found another drop of blood, never found a deer, nothing. And, feeling defeated, and confused, I had no idea what had gone on. I walked back to my truck and I'm just driving to work, and I pull into a gas station to get gas, and I go inside to pay, and the guy's like, hey, what's wrong with you? And I'm telling him my story. I'm like, man, I shot a deer yesterday. I can't find it. And he's like, you in the state game area? I'm like, yeah. And I told him right where I was hunting. He's like, man, that happens all the time. And it like clicked in my mind. I'm like, what do you mean this happens all the time? He's like, oh, last year I lost 2 deer out of there. And I know, he's like, oh, one of my buddies lost a deer a couple years ago. He's like, yeah, you're like the second or third person this season that's already lost one. And I'm like, man, that is, why is this not being talked about more? And
So Ruby and I were both car camping. So we were like she was in her car, I was in my car. We were like 15 feet away from each other. So we all go to bed, and Mike and them were in tents. So I get in my car, and I'm trying to sleep, and I cannot sleep at all. It was cold. I think I was probably excited from finding those prints, that trackway. Just could not sleep for nothing. And I had window blinds to keep out the light, so when the sun starts coming up, it won't bother me, So I have the blinds up. I'm laying in the hatchback of my brand new car, my new Subaru, right? So I'm laying there trying to sleep. This is stupid. Then all of a sudden, I start hearing something big and bipedal. Boom, 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 walking back and forth alongside the driver's side of my car. Back and forth, back and forth. And I'm like, I knew what it was, but I'm always skeptical, right? So I'm like, okay, is that Ruby? Could that possibly be Ruby? No, she wouldn't be walking that loud. And why is she walking so close to my car? It was right alongside my driver's side. My doors were unlocked. It could have opened a door, but it didn't. So after about walking back and forth 6 times, I'm just listening to this and I'm like, oh my God. Then push the hatch back, which is where I was. And I was like, whoa. I'm like, oh my God. But interesting thing is, once it pushed the hatch back, I never heard it walk away. Now it like intentionally made a lot of noise alongside my car, but I did not hear it leave, like walk away. It was really odd. So did it see me out there when I found its prints? Don't know. Don't know. So Ruby did not have an experience because she had taken some sleeping meds, right? So she probably had a similar thing happen, but she missed the whole thing, right? So in the morning, I get up and I go over to Mike and Chris's area, right, with the tents. And I wanted to tell them what happened, and Mike comes out of the tent. He's like, "Oh my God, we didn't sleep that great. Something big and bipedal was walking around our tent." And I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, "Oh my God." So I told them what happened with me in the car, and they're like, "Are you kidding me?" I'm like, no, it pushed the hatch back where I was at. You know, the only thing separating him and I was glass, right? But like I said, it could have opened the door. And
Yeah.
so that was amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you brought up. It was loud,
Mm-hmm.
and me thinking, and you probably think the same thing. It wanted you to know it was there,
Yeah, exactly.
and then
Exactly.
you might not have heard it get there necessarily, but
Right.
once it got into, I guess, your comfort zone or your area, it wanted to. I don't know if that's an intimidation factor or if that's
Right.
just saying, "Hey, I'm here," and
Yeah.
then it's stealthy when it leaves. That's really
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. Didn't hear it walk up. Didn't hear it walk away. But doggone it, it was like purposely stomping when it walked. It was just like boom, boom, boom. It wasn't trying to be stealthy at all. It was, it could be an intimidation thing. It was fun though. I enjoyed it.
That was there was not much separating you and the creature besides, I guess, the window, and that's it. Yeah. How big were the tracks that you found?
16 inches.
Okay.
16
so-
inches, 54-inch stride. So that's 4.5 feet stride between each print.
That's well more than a human.
And it was a 1/4 mile. For us, it ended at a creek, and we couldn't cross the creek, but it probably did. It could have maybe jumped over it, walked through the water, swam through the water, crossed a log to get to the other side. But that's as far as we could go, was the creek. And I did report it to the BFRO, and they assigned an investigator. I gave him all the coordinates. I gave him everything, and he said, "Yeah, you're right on." He goes, "It was exactly a 1/4 mile and measurement." So it was craziness.